Kale had always believed that the universe held more wonders than a single human mind could ever imagine. Standing at the edge of the Illyrian world's lavender plains, he felt the same mix of fear and excitement he had felt every time his team set foot on a new planet. The air here was thick with faintly glowing spores that drifted lazily across the landscape. The ground pulsed softly beneath his boots as if the planet itself were alive. Around him, the Illyrians moved with effortless grace. They were taller than humans, almost twice Kale's height, with pale blue skin that shimmered in sunlight and eyes that reflected the colors of the planet. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and full of power. Kale had watched them carefully since the expedition began, trying to understand their habits, their society, and the way they communicated without words. "Kyle, stay close," whispered Drina, the team's leader. Her voice was steady but tinged with concern. "These creatures are unpredictable. Don't wander off." Kale nodded, gripping his scanner tightly. His life depended not just on knowledge but on observation. While the Illyrians seemed confident and fearless, Kyle had learned to rely on different strengths: patience, careful analysis, and improvisation. To him, this planet was not about brute force. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Lyra, the young Illyrian warrior, walked slightly ahead. She glanced back at Kale and smirked. "Do humans always look so fragile?" she muttered under her breath. Kale heard her but ignored it. He had grown used to the subtle judgments of the Illyrians. They valued strength above all, and he was painfully aware that in their eyes humans were weak. Kyle and the Illyrians were exploring a shallow canyon when a sudden sound froze the group. A low guttural growl echoed off the rock walls. Drina raised her hand to signal caution. The growl was followed by the snapping of rocks. Something large was moving toward them. Kyle's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He scanned the canyon floor and walls with his sensors, searching for signs of the creatures. There were tracks deep and wide leading toward them. "Ambush," Lyra said, her voice sharp. Her eyes narrowed and she reached for her weapon. Kale noticed the ease with which she handled it, the confidence of someone trained to fight from birth. He, in contrast, had never held a weapon heavier than a handheld scanner in a real fight. The first of the predators appeared. They were quadrupeds with armored hides and glowing eyes moving with terrifying speed. Drina shouted orders and the Illyrians formed a defensive line. Kale froze for a moment, feeling the weight of his own vulnerability. But then something clicked in his mind. He remembered the old protocols. Fight if necessary, but only with what the environment offers. His eyes scanned the area, landing on a half-buried object partially covered by glowing dust. It was an energy blade, a weapon from the Illyrians' past, one that the elders often said was too dangerous for inexperienced hands. Instinctively, Kale dropped to one knee and grabbed the blade. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, he felt a strange connection, a surge of focus that sharpened his senses. The Illyrians around him froze, staring in disbelief. Humans were not supposed to wield such weapons. They were fragile, they were unpredictable, they were above all weak. Yet here he was, gripping a blade as though it had been made for him. The creatures lunged. Kyle's movements were not violent in the way Lyra's were. He did not rely on strength. He relied on timing and observation. With a swift motion, he swung the blade to redirect the first predator into the canyon wall. The creature stumbled but did not fall. Kale adjusted, using the slope of the ground to guide its momentum, and it crashed harmlessly into a pile of rocks. Lyra's jaw dropped. She had seen warriors fall to these predators, even trained Illyrians, and yet this human, this fragile, overlooked human, was holding his own. He moved with precision, anticipating attacks, using the environment to his advantage. Kale ducked a strike from another predator and rolled, letting the momentum carry him behind a boulder, then sprang up to strike another. Drina shouted encouragement, guiding the team to flank the predators. Kale worked in tandem with her instructions, adjusting his movements based on her commands. He realized that his strength was not in raw power, but in thinking faster than the creatures, predicting their behavior, and reacting with strategy rather than force. Minutes felt like hours, but gradually the predators were cornered, forced into a trap Kale had imagined almost instinctively. One by one they fled, retreating into the shadows of the canyon. The Illyrians stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide with astonishment. Lyra finally broke the silence. How did you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kale did not answer immediately. He was still catching his breath, still feeling the electric energy of survival thrumming in his veins. "I watched," he said simply. "I observed. Every movement, every reaction, and then I used what I had. Not strength. Strategy." Lyra's eyes narrowed. She had believed humans were helpless, creatures unfit for combat or survival in a hostile world. And yet she had just witnessed a human outmaneuver creatures that even trained Illyrians struggled with. The thought unsettled her. Drina placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "You saved us all," she said. I never thought a human could do that." Kale shook his head. "I didn't save anyone with power. I just didn't panic. That's all. Panic kills faster than claws or teeth." The group settled in a nearby clearing to recover. Kale cleaned the blade, examining it as if he were studying a tool rather than a weapon of war. Lyra kept glancing at him, her previous disdain replaced with curiosity. She wanted to understand how this human, so small, so fragile by her standards, had achieved what he did. Night fell, and the lavender plains glowed softly under 2 moons. The team set up camp, and the Illyrians moved with their usual elegance, though their conversations were quieter than usual. Kale sat by the fire, reflecting on the day. He had faced creatures that should have killed him, yet survived. Not because of strength, but because of thought, observation, and timing. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "Kyle." It was Lyra. She stepped close, eyes wide in a mixture of awe and disbelief. "I underestimated humans. I thought you were weak. I thought helpless, but you changed everything today." Kyle smiled faintly. "Strength isn't always measured by muscle or size," he said. "Sometimes it's measured by courage, by thinking, by refusing to give up even when everyone else expects you to fail." Lyra studied him in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always believed Illyrians were superior in every way, but this one human had proven her wrong. It was a lesson she would not forget. As the night deepened and the stars shimmered above the alien world, Kale felt a quiet sense of purpose. This planet was dangerous, yes, but it was also full of opportunities to learn, to survive, and perhaps to teach others what humans were truly capable of. He knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more unknown threats, but he was ready. The fire flickered across Kale's face, illuminating determination and calm. The Illyrians, though still wary, were beginning to see something new, a spark of admiration, respect, and perhaps even hope. Kale had arrived as the perceived weakest member of the team, yet he had shown that human ingenuity and courage could tip the balance in ways no one expected. And in that moment, under the glow of twin moons and alien stars, Kale realized that being underestimated was a human advantage. People thought they knew humans, but humans had a way of surprising the universe, sometimes with nothing more than a careful mind and a steady hand. The night was quiet, but the lavender plains whispered promises of adventure, danger, and the chance to show that humanity, even small and overlooked, could stand tall where others faltered. Kyle looked at the blade in his hand and smiled. Tomorrow, the universe would see just how much a human could change everything. The first light of dawn painted the lavender plains in soft shades of pink and gold. Kale stretched, the warmth of the sun brushing against his skin as he adjusted to the early hour. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind. The predators, the ambush, and the moment he had grasped the energy blade. It still felt strange to think that a human like him could change the course of a dangerous encounter on an alien planet. Around him, the Illyrians moved with practiced efficiency. They gathered supplies, checked equipment, and prepared for exploration. Kale noticed Lyra observing him from a distance, her blue eyes lingering with curiosity. Unlike yesterday, she said nothing. She simply watched, and he understood that she was trying to reconcile what she had seen with her beliefs about humans. Drina approached Kale, her expression calm but serious. "Kyle, we need your input," she said. "The previous attack, it was a warning. These predators don't normally attack in groups like that. Something is driving them closer to the canyon." Kale nodded, feeling a surge of responsibility. He may have been underestimated before, but now the Illyrians were counting on him for strategy, not just survival. He scanned the horizon with his sensor, noting the subtle changes in the terrain, the movement of dust, and the faint traces of the creatures' paths. "They're being pushed," Kale said, pointing toward a distant ridge. "Something larger, maybe a pack leader, is forcing them this way." If we follow their path carefully, we might find the source. Drina hesitated but then nodded. Agreed, but stay close to the line of warriors. We cannot risk another ambush, the team set out, moving cautiously. Kyle walked beside Lyra, who carried her weapon ready. The air between them was tense. Not hostility, but the quiet tension of mutual observation. She was watching him closely, noting how he moved, how he analyzed the terrain, and how he remained calm despite the potential danger. After an hour of careful tracking, Kale noticed something unusual. The predators had left a series of markings on the ground, almost like patterns, not random movements. He bent down, studying them. These are signals, he said. They're warning each other, marking territory, but there's more. Someone is directing them. Not naturally, but with intent. Lyra's eyes widened. A predator cannot do that on its own. There must be someone controlling them, Kale nodded. Exactly. And whoever it is, they are nearby. We need to approach carefully, or we risk walking into a trap. The Illyrians moved silently, guided by Kale's observations. He led them through hidden paths behind rock formations and across ridges that provided the best vantage points. His knowledge of human strategy, using observation, improvisation, and environmental advantage, began to impress Lyra more with every step. Finally, they reached a narrow canyon, shrouded in mist. Kale crouched, studying the scene. There, in the center, was a group of predators gathered around a strange device, glowing faintly with energy. It pulsed rhythmically, and every predator seemed drawn to it, moving as if in a coordinated pattern. What is that? Lyra whispered. Kale shook his head. Not sure yet, but it's controlling them somehow. We need to disable it without alerting the predators fully, or it could get out of control. Drina frowned. Kale, you want to handle it? Kale looked at her, then at Lyra. I'll need support, but this isn't about strength. It's about timing and precision. Follow my instructions exactly, and we can end this without unnecessary fighting. Lyra stepped forward, gripping her weapon. I'll follow you, just show me what to do. Kale studied the terrain. He noticed a cluster of rocks forming a natural barrier and a narrow path that could funnel the predators away from the device. We'll use the terrain, he said. I'll approach the device from the left, using the rocks as cover. Lyra, you'll take the right and create a distraction if needed. Drina, coordinate the team to guide the predators into the canyon's natural traps. Lyra nodded, her trust in him growing with every word. Kale had earned it yesterday, and now she saw that his mind worked differently, faster, more creatively, and in ways that Illyrians rarely considered. As Kale crept forward, the blade in his hand felt like an extension of himself. It wasn't about raw power. It was about control, precision, and confidence. The predators noticed him but hesitated, sensing something different in his movements, something unpredictable. That hesitation was all Kale needed. He moved swiftly, disabling the device with a series of calculated strikes, careful not to generate energy spikes that could harm the creatures. The predators, momentarily confused, began to scatter. Lyra followed her path, signaling the creatures away from the main group. Drina's team guided them into natural enclosures formed by rocks, effectively neutralizing the threat without a single Illyrian being hurt. When it was over, Kale stepped back, breathing heavily. Lyra approached, eyes wide with admiration. I've never seen anyone do that, she said. Not even our best warriors. Kyle shook his head. It's not about being the strongest. It's about observing, thinking, and using what's around you. Humans, we survive by understanding, not by overpowering. Lyra's expression softened. She had started the day believing humans were weak, helpless, and insignificant in a fight. Now she saw them differently. Kale had not just survived. He had changed the outcome of a dangerous situation with his mind and courage. Drina approached, placing a hand on Kyle's shoulder. You've proven something remarkable. The Illyrians value strength, but you've shown us that intelligence and timing are equally powerful. Kyle smiled faintly. I just did what I thought was necessary. That's all. As the team prepared to return to the main camp, Lyra walked beside Kale, her tone quieter than before. You have something the rest of us don't always see. Humans have a way of thinking beyond what seems possible. I underestimated that, and I shouldn't have. Kale nodded. Strength comes in many forms. Yours is obvious, but ours is quieter. And sometimes it surprises people. The journey back was filled with cautious optimism. The predators were contained, the device was neutralized, and the Illyrians had learned a lesson in humility. Kale's presence was no longer a point of concern but a source of guidance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of violet and gold, Kale sat outside the camp staring at the stars. He thought about the day's events, the predators, and the device that had caused so much trouble. More than that, he thought about the Illyrians, how their perceptions of humans were changing, and how he, a single human, had the ability to influence not only outcomes but minds. Lyra joined him quietly, sitting across the small fire. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she finally said, "Kyle, I want to understand. Teach me how you think, how you see the world differently. Humans, you're not what I expected. You're extraordinary in ways I didn't realize." Kyle smiled, placing the blade carefully beside him. "It's not magic or mystery. It's observation, patience, and courage. Anyone can do it if they train their mind to see patterns, to predict and to act when it matters most. You've already done it in your own way. Lyra, you just never thought about it like that." For the first time, Lyra looked at him not as a human, not as someone fragile or helpless, but as a partner, an ally, and someone whose mind could change outcomes in ways even the strongest Illyrians could not. The night grew colder, and the camp settled into quiet preparation for tomorrow. Kale and Lyra watched the twin moons rise, each reflecting on what had been learned. One had learned that humans could survive and excel in ways that strength alone could not predict. The other had begun to realize that the universe was full of surprises, and that underestimating anyone, especially a human, could be a dangerous mistake. And as the stars shimmered above, Kale felt a sense of determination settle in his chest. The Illyrians had begun to see humans in a new light, and he knew that tomorrow would bring even greater challenges. Challenges that would test not only strength but creativity, courage, and the power of the mind. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and full of dangers, but Kale smiled. He was ready. The morning sun cast long shadows over the lavender plains as Kale awoke to the distant hum of the Illyrian camp, preparing for another day of exploration. His mind was already busy thinking through yesterday's events, the ambush, the predators, the device, and what they revealed about this world. For the Illyrians, strength was measured in size, speed, and brute force. For Kale, strength was measured in observation, strategy, and adaptability. Drina approached him, her expression calm but serious. "Kale, the sensors picked up unusual activity near the northern ridge. It's different from yesterday. The predators are regrouping, but something else is moving with them." Kale's curiosity sharpened. "Then we need to investigate, but carefully. This isn't about fighting, it's about understanding. If we know what drives them, we can prevent future attacks without unnecessary conflict." Lyra arrived, her eyes still reflecting the awe and respect she had begun to feel toward Kale. "You're leading the investigation?" she asked, her tone cautious. Kyle nodded. "Yes, I want you beside me. Watch and learn, if you will." Lyra nodded silently. Her pride had been challenged before, and she was both cautious and intrigued by this human whose mind seemed to operate in a way she had never seen. The team moved toward the northern ridge, carefully avoiding open plains where predators could ambush them. Kale led, scanning the terrain and noting every unusual detail: the broken branches, the flattened soil, the faint energy trails left by the predators. To the Illyrians, much of it seemed insignificant. To Kale, it was a roadmap. As they approached the ridge, Kale stopped and crouched, studying the ground. The predators aren't moving randomly. Someone or something is guiding them. Look at these patterns. They're designed to herd the creatures in a specific direction, toward a choke point in the canyon. Lyra frowned, kneeling beside him. "Why would anyone do that? To control them?" Kale nodded. "Yes, and if we understand the method, we can disrupt it without unnecessary fighting. We can think smarter, not just harder." The Illyrians moved along the ridge, following Kale's guidance. Unlike the humans' usual reliance on instinct and sheer force, Kale constantly paused to observe, to calculate, and to test his assumptions. Lyra watched him in silence, noting how he seemed to predict events before they happened. It was not magic or luck, it was method, patience, and clear thought. Soon, they found the source of the control. Another device, larger than the first, embedded in the ground and radiating a soft, pulsating energy. Around it, predators circled obediently, drawn to its signal. Kyle crouched, examining it carefully. "This device, It amplifies the creature's instincts and makes them follow commands. If we remove it incorrectly, it could trigger an uncontrolled attack. Drina looked at him sharply. Then what do you suggest? Kale's eyes lit with determination. We disable it remotely using the terrain and some modifications to the equipment we already have. We don't need to fight them. We need to think creatively. He spent the next few hours working using scraps of Illyrian tech, wiring, and his own makeshift tools. Lyra watched fascinated as Kale combined components in ways that seemed almost impossible. He explained every step in simple terms, showing that understanding principles and patterns could overcome brute strength. See? Lyra, Kyle said, pointing to a small device he had assembled. This will interfere with the signal just enough to confuse the predators without harming them. They'll scatter harmlessly and the device will be disabled. Timing is critical. One wrong step and we lose control. Lyra nodded, impressed. You're extraordinary, she admitted quietly. She had spent her life learning to fight and survive in the Illyrian way, relying on strength, skill, and instincts honed from childhood. Kale's approach was different. It was intelligence in motion, a new kind of power she had never appreciated before. As Kale finished his preparations, the predators reacted to a distant sound. One of the humans had accidentally triggered a small noise. Instantly, Kale sprang into action. Using hand signals and precise instructions, he directed Lyra to distract a few of the creatures, while the others guided the remaining ones into a natural trap formed by the canyon walls. Kale moved swiftly to the device, using his homemade interference tool. The energy pulse flickered, then stabilized at a neutral level. The predators froze, then scattered calmly back into the wilderness. The device lay dormant, harmless, and Kyle's team breathed a collective sigh of relief. Drina shook her head in disbelief. I've never seen such control without fighting. You outsmarted them all. Kale smiled faintly. Observation, analysis, and timing. That's all it takes. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and humility. I thought humans were helpless, she said softly. But you proved me wrong. Not by strength, but by mind. By thinking differently, you changed the outcome completely. Kale looked at her and nodded. Strength is not always about muscles or size. Sometimes the greatest power is knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to use what's around you. Humans, we survive by understanding the world and acting smartly. That's our gift. The Illyrians, once confident in their superiority, began to see humans differently. Kale had not only neutralized a threat, but he had demonstrated a new kind of strength, a combination of intellect, courage, and adaptability. The team returned to the camp, where Kale began helping the Illyrians adapt some of their tools based on his observations. Using human ingenuity, he modified energy barriers, creating safer paths for travel and exploration. Lyra observed every move, asking questions, learning, and gradually seeing the world through Kale's perspective. By midday, Kale had drawn a small crowd of curious Illyrians. See, he said, demonstrating a simple modification to a communication device. We don't need to overpower anything. We just need to understand how it works and then use it cleverly. Knowledge, observation, and timing, those are as powerful as any weapon. Lyra watched closely, realizing that Kale's methods were not just effective, they were revolutionary. They challenged every assumption she had held about strength, power, and survival. Humans, she now understood, were underestimated not because they were weak, but because they were different. Their strengths lay in ways the Illyrians had never considered. As the day progressed, Kale continued to teach, explain, and demonstrate. The Illyrians listened, absorbed, and adapted. By the time the twin moons began to rise, the team had learned new strategies, new methods of navigation, and new ways to handle predators and environmental hazards, all inspired by a human who had been considered fragile and helpless. That night, as the camp settled, Lyra approached Kale quietly. I underestimated you, she admitted. I thought humans couldn't survive here without Illyrians protecting them. But today I've seen the truth. You think differently. You see opportunities we overlook. You're extraordinary. Kale looked at her, holding the energy blade carefully by his side. I'm just human, he said with a faint smile. But humans have a way of adapting, of seeing what others don't, that's all. You can do it too. You just need to look at the world differently. For the first time, Lyra didn't see him as fragile. She saw him as a partner. An equal, and someone whose mind could turn impossible situations into victories. The firelight reflected in her eyes, filled with newfound respect and curiosity. Kyle sat back, feeling the calm of accomplishment. He had faced danger not with raw power, but with strategy and intelligence. The Illyrians had learned something new about humans, and he had learned something about them. In the quiet glow of the twin moons, he felt the stirrings of something greater, a realization that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could indeed influence worlds in ways no one expected. The night was peaceful, but Kale knew the challenges were far from over. The rival faction that threatened the Illyrians was still out there, planning, observing, waiting. But he also knew that with observation, ingenuity, and courage, humans could face even the most formidable threats. And so, under the soft light of alien moons, Kale prepared. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new challenges, and perhaps a chance to prove that human ingenuity could outshine even the greatest strength. He was ready. The lavender plains lay quiet under the morning sun, but Kale could feel the tension in the air. Scouts had reported movement along the horizon, a fleet of hostile alien forces, the rival faction, approaching with organized precision. Unlike the Illyrians, who relied on raw strength and weapons of overwhelming power, Kale had spent hours studying the terrain, analyzing the enemy patterns, and preparing a strategy that required intelligence, timing, and ingenuity. Drina assembled the Illyrian warriors, their tall figures shining in the sun. Lyra stood beside Kale, her expression unreadable, but her eyes betrayed anticipation and trust. She had already seen Kyle's unique way of thinking, how humans could use observation, timing, and clever tactics to overcome threats far stronger than themselves. Today the universe would see it again. Listen carefully, Kale said, his voice calm but firm. The enemy expects a frontal assault. They think strength alone will win the day. We will not fight them the way they expect. We will use the terrain, traps, and misdirection. Every move must be precise. Lyra's hand rested on her weapon, but she was not impatient. She had learned to trust Kale's mind more than brute force, and today, that trust would be tested. Kyle led the team to a series of natural choke points, narrow passes between rock formations, shallow ridges, and hidden pits. He set up simple mechanical devices, improvised barriers, and observation points that allowed them to anticipate every movement of the enemy. The Illyrians, initially skeptical, followed his instructions, placing their strengths where they mattered most. Guided by Kale's precise calculations, the first wave of the rival faction arrived, their alien forms moving like a tide across the plains. They expected the Illyrians to meet them with sheer strength. Kale watched from his vantage point, noting every formation, every advance, and every flaw in their tactics. With subtle hand signals, he directed Lyra and the warriors to lure them into the choke points. Kale held the energy blade, not as a weapon of brute force, but as a tool of timing and precision. As the enemy fell into the traps, pits, and barriers activated seamlessly. Confused and trapped, they could not advance effectively. Kale adjusted movements constantly, predicting attacks and guiding Illyrians with calm authority. Lyra moved beside him, striking when necessary but following Kale's lead. He did not fight with rage or strength. He fought with clarity, reading the battlefield like a chessboard. The enemy was powerful, but they were predictable. Kale's mind turned their predictability into their weakness. Hours passed, the battle swaying with Kale's guidance. Illyrians who had once relied on strength alone now coordinated using Kale's strategy. The rival faction struggled to adapt, their confidence faltering as every move was anticipated. Even Lyra, skilled and fearless, was amazed at the human mind shaping the battle so effectively. Finally, Kale seized a critical moment. A small contingent of enemies had broken through a barrier and were advancing toward the Illyrian camp. Kale sprinted, blade in hand, calculating every step, every strike. His movements were precise, guiding the Illyrians to block paths and redirect forces. He did not overwhelm with strength. He outmaneuvered with intelligence. The rival faction, facing impossible odds, began to retreat. Kale's plan had worked. Minimal Illyrian losses, enemy routed, and the battlefield controlled entirely by strategy, timing, and human ingenuity. As the dust settled, Drina and the Illyrians gathered around Kale. "You've done the impossible," she said. "Even our best warriors could not have done this alone. Your mind. It changed the battle." Lyra stepped forward, her expression one of awe and respect. I thought humans were helpless, she admitted. I was wrong. You showed me what humans can really do. Strength is not just in arms. It's in mind, in courage, and in creativity. Kyle smiled, holding the blade lightly. Strength comes in many forms. Humans survive because we adapt. We think, we observe, and we act. Today was proof of that. The Illyrians had learned a vital lesson. Underestimated humans could shape outcomes in ways brute strength never could. Kale had not just survived. He had led, inspired, and won without relying on sheer power. As the twin moons rose, Kyle and Lyra looked over the battlefield, silent in reflection. The rival faction had retreated, but Kale knew this was just the beginning. Greater challenges lay ahead, but he had proven that humans were far more capable than anyone had imagined. The night was quiet, but the lavender plains whispered the promise of new adventures, new dangers, and new victories, all guided by a human mind that refused to be limited by assumptions or expectations. The morning after the battle was calm, almost surreal. The lavender plains stretched endlessly under the pale light of the twin suns, the aftermath of the fight visible in the scattered equipment and the traces of footprints from retreating enemies. Kale walked among the Illyrians, inspecting the battlefield, noting areas where strategy had worked and where it could improve. Lyra approached, her expression thoughtful. You saved many lives yesterday, she said softly. Not just with your blade, but with your mind. I misjudged humans, Kale shook his head. I didn't do it alone. Everyone followed the plan. The Illyrians' strength and courage made it possible. I just helped guide it differently. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Still, you've shown something remarkable. Humans have ways of surviving, of thinking, that we often overlook. Strength isn't only muscle or speed, it's insight, timing, and adaptability. You've taught us that lesson. Drina approached as well, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder. The council has asked me to speak with you. They want you to become an honorary advisor. Your strategies, your understanding of observation and timing, could help the Illyrians face challenges we cannot even imagine. Kyle smiled, feeling both pride and humility. I'll do what I can, he said. But remember, humans are not magic. We survive and succeed by thinking, by observing, and by acting with clarity. That is something anyone can learn. Lyra walked beside him as the Illyrians began to clean the battlefield and repair the damage. I want to learn, she said. Teach me how you think, how you see opportunities where others see obstacles. Humans, you've opened my eyes to something new. Kyle nodded. Then I will teach, and together we can prepare for whatever comes next. Strength is not always obvious. Sometimes it is quiet, careful, and unexpected. The Illyrians gathered around the campfire that evening, a mixture of relief and respect in their expressions. Kale spoke of tactics, observation, and adaptability, showing how even the smallest details could influence outcomes. He demonstrated modifications to their equipment and shared insights on predicting enemy movements. Each lesson was simple but profound, revealing the power of intelligence and creativity. Lyra listened closely, asking questions, experimenting, and learning. Her admiration for Kale grew, not for his size or strength, but for his courage, intelligence, and ability to remain calm under pressure. He had changed the way she saw humans and the universe itself. As night fell, Kale stepped outside, holding the energy blade one last time. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of the human ability to adapt, to think, and to succeed against overwhelming odds. Lyra joined him silently, both of them looking at the horizon where the twin moons reflected in the still waters of a distant river. Do you ever worry? Lyra asked softly. That humans will be underestimated again? Kale smiled. Perhaps, but being underestimated is an advantage. People assume we are weak, fragile, or helpless. That gives us the chance to surprise them. Humans can turn what others see as weakness into strength. That is who we are. For a long moment, they both watched the stars shimmer above, silent in reflection. The battles had tested them, revealed their strengths, and reshaped their understanding of one another. Lyra had learned humility and respect. Kale had learned that even the strongest beings could benefit from a new perspective. Drina joined them, her expression one of quiet approval. The council will be pleased, she said. You've proven something extraordinary, not just in battle but in understanding. Humans are formidable in ways we never imagined. Kyle placed the blade down, looking at it with quiet reverence. It's not just the weapon, he said. It's the mind behind it. Humans have a way of turning challenges into opportunities, obstacles into lessons. That is our true strength. The Illyrians had learned an important truth. Power was not always measured in size or force. Courage, ingenuity, observation, and adaptability could tip the balance even against overwhelming odds. And humans, though often underestimated, could become leaders, advisors, and heroes in ways the universe had yet to recognize. As the twin moons rose over the lavender plains, Kale felt a sense of accomplishment and purpose. He had arrived as a fragile human, overlooked and underestimated. He had faced danger, guided strategy, and influenced outcomes with his mind and courage. Now the Illyrians respected him not only as an ally but as an equal. The night air was calm, filled with possibilities. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges. But Kale smiled, knowing that humans, clever, adaptable, and brave, could face any threat. They could survive, they could lead, and they could change everything. And so, under alien stars and twin moons, Kale and the Illyrians looked to the horizon, ready for the future, united by respect, understanding, and the shared knowledge that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the